you know, I don't make these videos to be fancy. I put the backdrop up and I was going to try to do it like a lot of people, but I can't because it's all about coffee or brandy and cigars. It's all about sitting around like Bill Maher does. That's what I'm all about. I was always, hey, let's sit together with the guys and talk about something real because that's how the circles are. They're middle class circles, but they were emulating the elites. They were elitist in the beginning, but the idea was education kept coming. That's what it was. It wasn't that we were trying to be like the elites. Before, only the elites used to get educated, and then more and more people got educated the same way the elites did, and they call it an elitist education. Whereas, what? Do we have a proletariat education that just puts people to work and just makes them basically literate? Yes, maybe. And there's nothing wrong with that because most of the people are not interested in what's happening in the world's politics. But I wanted, I ate so much. I just had like a huge meal, like, oh, it was extremely carbohydrate rich meal, and I just feel like I can't even breathe. I'm almost like. Anyway, quickly, I'm going to talk about what's happening in the non-aligned world. The non-aligned world was a threat to the world order. Now, the world order should have a success rate in winning over the enemies, which are the non-aligned people. We've been able to win some of them over, but we can't win a lot of them because the mentality is still the same about what they're against Western Europe and the United States. I'm not going to try to unite Western Europe and the United States because right now I just posted up something about how the EU will support Ukraine, but the United States isn't. And I'm worried it's not just a World War III plan, but it might be a bad World War III plan. It might be a really bad World War III plan because we're trying to populate our countries with more people like minded to Western European white Christians, and they're all in Europe. And if there's a World War III where the United States decides to tank Europe and says, you know what, we don't care. Yeah, they're the lenders, they're the bankers, they're the people who influence our culture so much. They have all these think tanks, organizations, NGOs. They come to us, tell us what to do, like we're their sister, daughter country, or a son, country that's a offspring country, not like a real country that makes its own choices. Why don't we tank them? We take away the funding, let them go fight Putin, and let's see what happens. We're going to get populated. Canada and the United States, Australia, we're going to get a lot of white people, and they're going to bring in a very massive cultural change, which is well needed. And usually, the ones that were hungry and war torn are the ones that have the most drive to succeed, and they're the ones that have most children, and they even try to pay off the children's debts. Like, this is true. It's a very good idea. But I think it's bad because we don't need a World War III. I still believe we don't need a World War III. That's not the only thing that's good with this idea that the United States might be ditching Europe and saying, go ahead, fight Putin without us, like Mr. Trump said. Because obviously, all the people in the States are with Europe and they're with the left, and the left is bigger than Europe, right? It's also Canada, Australia. Australia, not that much. Canada, yes. But something came to mind, One of the things I thought about is we are never allowed to say anything about European racism, inter-racism. And one of them was the poverty of Eastern Europe and its close proximity to the Islamic Empire up till 1924, and Western Europe, which was supposedly the better, cleaner, greater nation of the two. If there were two nations, naturally, there's many more, right? If you go into Europe, if you go back 300 years ago, there would be places even in Germany where they can't understand each other. Okay, 400 years ago. If you go back in England, up till 300 years ago, they wouldn't understand each other from just I'm talking like 100, 200 miles. People would not understand. They would have to, it's just, they have just risen. I don't want the Europeans to fall. They have just gotten some self-confidence. The Islamic community is on the Islamic side. We're here as immigrants, but we're here to influence you for the good things. We're telling you, don't disunite. Don't disparage over a little bit of a tiff that we had over Trump. It's okay. You guys got scared. It was scary. You thought it was going to be a populist wildfire that'll go out of control, and we're all going to end up, losing an important investment. The United States is an investment. Many Europeans are invested in the United States. They didn't do it alone. They did it with them on oil and for this, for that, for this. It's a very complicated transaction. The businesses are very complex. These big banks and governments are businesses too now, right? The customers. and then they dole out cash for the people. They take revenue, so it's much more complicated. Whenever there's money, there's a lot of ill. In the old country, money would cause tribes to kill each other, to whack some guy over the head and take his entire family and stuff. And this is more complicated. I'm not saying there hasn't been assassinations of important people, but we have to learn to unite. And one of the things I'll close with this argument. I find a lot of things that are wrong with culture based on my own observation. That's why I do this, because I'm an observer. It's one of the actually our prophet Muhammad, and I'm Muslim in the sense that I was born Muslim, and I come from an important bloodline in the Islamic world, from his family, from Muhammad's family. But the way I see it is we were all observers. If you look at the Quran, the reason it makes so much sense is because we're all observant. We observe things. We're very simple people. We're out in the desert, very simple ideas of everything, and we can see it. Hasidic Jews are like that too. They talk about the essence of things. They don't complicate things. And similar to this, I was watching the news about this. I think the United States likes President Xi and Putin because Americans are meritocracies. The culture is a meritocracy. They look at the merit of people. They look at the personal character of people. They don't look at who's supposed to be an enemy, who's supposed to be a friend. They don't do that. They do when they have to, because they're master politicians today. They're great military industrial leaders, but they don't. It's not in their nature. They like Xi because he's a true capitalist trader. He was able to make deals with them that made them richer too. Made China rich. It made them rich. They like Putin because he's got courage. He's a white man. He came. They, turned his whole country into a gangster nightmare. Sure, he has an oligarchy, an oligopoly. But he cleaned it up. It was this pride. It was this revolutionary spirit, Russia and this and that. They like him for who he is, and they like Xi for who he is. And the Europeans can't get mad about that. They have to figure out how we're going to make this multilateral thing work without these problems. And let me talk about food arrogance. Iranians, Venezuelans, non-aligned movement, they're the leaders of the non-aligned world because the rest of them are poor African nations. And though we're trying to win over the African countries and South America, they say the only thing America came out with Biden and COVID was food arrogance. Food arrogance. All they proved is it's like that guy in the neighborhood who has the most food stored up. Like, that's all? That's all you came out with? You have rampant killing, crimes up. You didn't do that well after the lockdown. You guys couldn't clean up the economy. It's in shambles. All you said is we were able to feed people. We were able to feed people in those 2 years, and you showed that off to the whole world. And let me tell you about food arrogance. I was talking about Slavic people, how Slavic people are always treated with racism in Europe as like they're not even white European Christians, and they are. They absolutely are. They're the reason why Europeans are Christians. Today, Europeans would be Muslims. If there was no Slav, Slavs were diehard Orthodox. You can only fight Orthodoxy with Orthodoxy. You can't fight Orthodoxy with transgendered people because to them it's like, it has nothing to do with me, eh? And that's how they are. We're dealing with a bunch of people like that. So the reason Slavs are very strong, but there's a lot of racism towards them. There was a lot of racist towards them. Now I'm going to put words in your mouth because I'm also wondered if we should. You hear all kinds of things. You feel a lot of things. People, it's a complex argument to make. But let me tell you this. You go out east, there's a line there where everybody eats cabbage because cabbage grows easily. And it's actually really good for you. And there's cabbage rolls this, there's cabbage rolls there, there's rice and meat and cabbage. Everything is cabbage in the Slavic world because cabbage really is good for you. It cleans you out. It's got a high fiber content, and it's low in carbs. It's actually low in carbs. It's keto friendly. And you can mix it with a lot of foods. And it's got high mineral rich. If you're going to fight war and battle, you have to be rich in iron and all this zinc. But the point is, the very idea of food arrogance, I thought of one example. I could come up with a lot if I really look it up. You can't find videos like this on YouTube. That's why I have this. That's why I have to do this for whoever the special crowd is that listens. But then on the other side, we have Brussels sprouts from Brussels. Brussels is supposed to be that great, arrogant, rich nation north of Luxembourg, where everything is decided by the kings and the aristocracy and the Jewish bankers and the Christian bankers and whoever else are the big snotty guys of Europe. And Brussels sprouts are basically baby cabbages picked up good as a luxury. You have 50 Brussels sprouts versus 50 cabbages. out east, it was important to grow them to full size so you could sell them and make money so the farmer could plant again. And instead, we have Brussels sprouts, which are like, it was a delicacy. And I know to us today, Brussels sprouts, we think about it in a different way, but I'm just being honest with you that a lot of this, they matter to each other more than we matter to each other because they're cousins. They're all related. You go back 800 years, there were two Gothic invasions. There was a Celtic move in the north, and there was the Vikings who were the Frankish, actually, all the way down here. They're all related. They just moved around a lot. And the point is, maybe even Brussels sprouts was done to smite, to rub it in their faces, like cabbages. They would come out and visit and trade, and like, you guys just pick up the cabbage when they're this small and you eat them in a bowl, whereas we have to grow 10 of those. We have to grow those. Those are 10 full cabbages in just a month. And that's food arrogance that exists in all of us because some of us go hungry. There's no food arrogance if there's no one that's hungry. If we're all eating, you can't be food arrogant. Like, I can't be like, oh, today, how do we do it? Nouveau cuisine. I mean, there's got to be a market for the rich people, and amen to that. There should be a market for rich people. You should pay $500 a plate for a special chef who makes, whatever it is, $180,000 a year, and he puts something like, a plate together, and he's just, he's now it's science and chemistry as well, how to bring out flavors, chemicals, this and that. Sure, even if it isn't, even though they've proven it is, that is a different kind of food arrogance. But when there's just food arrogance, like we have stockpiles of canned food. We have to be careful that we understand each other. Stay united. Don't fight Europe. Don't fight with the United States. United States, forgive Europe. Forgive them. They are who they are. They're snotty. They're the motherland. They pride themselves in the things we can't understand. Why a Swiss cheese has to be made by this monastery and it can only be called that. They're holding on to cultural roots, which is important. We're all going to have to, the whole world is getting exciting. We learn about culture. And Europe, please forgive the United States. They have a free will. They like to run rampant. They like doing things. They're experimental. They've brought us the greatest things in the world. Just in the last, whether or not you all help fund them, they have a crazy spirit nature. Let them enjoy. Let them try to figure out how they're going to experiment and figure out the next thing for themselves. And if they like Trump, and if they want to go back to what makes them proud of their culture, which is not about the Swiss cheese, but it's going to be about what comes from Wyoming, has this specific character, or what comes from whatever, let them do it. We can't destroy their culture just because they got a little, bigger than we thought they would. I think you all should forgive each other. And as far as Mr. Putin, I think he isn't such a bad guy. I don't think he's an enemy. I think it's hard for the people who are not Russians to have lived under Russian rule for so long, and they were hard on them. They didn't like them. They don't like Russians because they were arrogant people, but they were a master race. I think master race is a very hard term to put onto YouTube these days, but it's a dominant race. There's always going to be a dominant or a group. Sometimes one race will still have a group that'll be dominant, and no one likes the dominant people because they own things, they run things, they tell people what to do, and everyone hates those people. And I think the Russians were the ones that got the blame for that. And that's all I want to say. I hope this all works out well, but please don't go into World War III like this. The United States will cream half the world again, and we're going to be set back. And I don't want that because I have family in Europe. And I feel sad for Europeans because they've never gotten it quite right. They don't live as excessively as we do. And we are beginning to feel the pain of having high costs and low productivity. We're beginning to feel the same way as them. But I don't think the war is the answer.